What's going on, folks? Happy Friday, everybody. Thank you for being here. Happy Paintover Friday. I hope everyone's had a good week. Well, I haven't been here. You can see I've still not got anything set up here. We still got a microphone in the way. The color's still black and white. It's all over the place. But how is everybody doing today? I hope well, and I hope that they've had a good week, that they're staying safe and healthy, and dealing with everything going on in the world, which we're not going to talk about today. We've talked about that a lot. I'm sure we'll be talking about it again soon. Today we're going to talk about some work. We have two really interesting paintovers to do, really challenging paintovers. And if I can find... Here she is. We can get started. So, Michaela, thank you for being here. Martin Banners, we're just going to go full American on your name today. Since we'll probably be saying it a whole bunch. How you doing? Clark, good to see you. Luca, good to see you as well. And Nitin. Guys, happy to have you here. Let's get started. We're gonna start with I'm not fully organized. Let me prep things just a smidge. Oh, is this just repeating the same song over and over and over again? I think it is. We don't want that. It'll drive us insane. I think that happened last time, and I'm not entirely sure why. Oh, I know why now. There we go. Okay. That little one button got me. Okay, let's see here. Let's organize ourselves so we can kind of see. Maybe. Does this want to move? That doesn't want to move. Yeah, whatever. What can we do? Doop-a-doo. Okay, so this image we have from Nicholas Boyson. And it's a rad image. We got some Kit Bash Brutalist kit in there, which I'm always excited to see, and I dig. And both the images today, this is Martin's image that we're going to look at after this. Both the images are images that I got, and I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to do with them? They're both gorgeous. Because they are. I really, really like Martin's image. I really, really like Nicholas's image. And when I sat down and looked at them, I'm like, I can see things I would change. I don't know if I would make them better or not. So let's put that as like a grain of salt over the entire day today. That I really like both of these images. And wasn't entirely sure what to do with them at first, at least. But hopefully there's a couple of things that I kind of came up with that I think help. That I hopefully have some value. We'll find out. Martin, I wish I could burn you to the ground, buddy, but I love that image. I have some comments for it. I have some suggestions of my opinion on it, but I love the image. And I think it's important that I say that at front. Nicholas, same with yours. I don't think you're with us right now, but hopefully you will be later. So starting with Nicholas's, he said in his email that this is a test image or personal work that he was working on, and was going like for a cinematic grade or cinematic look to it, and I think he kind of nailed it from the beginning. One of the things that we're gonna see in the time lapse. Let me show the after. So this is where I ended up coming up with, and just adding up a little bit of depth and trying to remove some of these like hard edges, I think is the biggest thing. We have a lot of we have this beautiful low-hanging cloud kind of sweeping through the whole thing, but that all of that kind of low-hanging misty atmosphere happens beyond this tree line in the buildings. We have a little bit here, but then again we're just getting like a straight line. And I think just like simply kind of like toning those down so that the atmosphere breathe into the scene and bring back some of the mountains in the original image really, really helps. I will say that I ended up painting over his final. He sent me his PSD. Let's see here. Which had something like this as a starting point, which if we turn off the sky, so this was the raw render that he used. And then this was his final. And I started working on this, but you can see in the final, Nicholas has used a little bit of barrel distortion or lens distortion. So you can see everything move just a little bit, kind of breathe forward. which means that I couldn't use any of the masks on his final, and I loved the sky that he ended up using. So even though I went through and did some like quick painting from scratch, we're not going to look at that today. I don't think it was helpful. I don't think I got anywhere near as cool as he had already gotten. So I ended up painting over just his final image, not using any layers. I have no big issues with barrel distortion, but if anyone's sending me an image for Paintover, it would be very much appreciated if you send me your final image and any render elements you think would be useful without any distortion applied, because removing that's finicky, you know how it is. All right, let's get to a time lapse, shall we? And we can talk a little bit more about what I did. Come on, Wacom. Okay, let's move this out of the way. Let's get to the screen that actually shows. Nope, not that one. This one, yeah. And I think that's playing. Yes, it should be playing. Then I do play guitar, just for fun, just kind of folky finger style-y stuff, to entertain my daughter and, you know, pass the time and let my brain think about other things each now and again. So the first thing that I'm doing here in this image is he was going for a cinematic grade, and I felt like the first thing that we can do if we want to go for cinematic grade, you can go like very quickly to that like cyan orange color, complementary color look to everything, and it immediately, almost all films are graded to some level of cyan and orange. It's really helpful for skin tones. It helps make subjects and people pop, which are obviously generally the focus of films. And so I kind of start moving the reds towards a little bit more orange, or a decent amount more orange, and the blues a little bit more towards like a greenish cyan color. I also used Nick Collection to quickly grab the sky. Like its control points that we looked at a couple of weeks ago are really helpful when you don't have a clean mask and you don't want to make a clean mask, to adjust things globally. So we're going to kind of tone back how heavy-handed I first started with things here. But that's kind of the first step to cinematic as far as my book. I am by no means an expert on cinematic grading. But kind of just darkening everything down, pushing it again to that cyan orange color shift. And then at this point, I think is when I went over and I started saying like, oh, what if we edited this from scratch? And then I did that for a little bit and I'm like, that's not getting anywhere. And so then I came back and ended up like, it doesn't look painterly at the end of this, but I do end up painting a decent amount over top of this. One of the things that Nicholas mentioned in his email is that he's having trouble replacing skies. And at the resolution that I had, and with the wires and stuff, it was a really challenging thing to grab like a clean matte for, and I kind of lost patience for it. So Nicholas, I'm sorry about that. We could do something about replacing skies, I think in and of itself. But if you, especially with like wires and trees, if you can't grab a clean matte for the sky, and you're seeing halos everywhere, it's really hard, at least for me, to like just focus on what I'm doing and not be distracted by those things. But I think one of the things that I saw in the raw render that's gone in your final that we're gonna bring back at some point here is you had all these distant mountains, and I love all the low-hanging clouds covering the distant mountains, but they essentially just remove them in your edit. And I think bringing them back just a little bit gives more depth to the scene. So when I looked at your image, the kind of first read that I had was you had a couple of foreground elements and then like everything in the midground and then a sky. And what I'm trying to do, and you guys can judge on how successful or unsuccessful it is kind of stretch that visual depth in the image so that you read your immediate foreground images, the trees on the side and the one rock, and then you read that further back to the first building on the left that then is connected to the Brutalist building that then has a background behind it. So there's a bit more kind of visual emphasis or visual depth for a viewer to kind of walk into. And so you can see me kind of soft, quick, or roughly painting in kind of these mountain shapes. You can see all the little edges from things not lining up. So just trying to get them there, kind of. I probably could have painted them in. I didn't. I don't have a good reason why. But we'll do that, and then we'll go back and kind of start to clean some of the messiness up from it, without actually painting over the entire image, but just cleaning a few things up, giving it, again, just another layer of depth, which not only gives you more to actually kind of retreat to visually, but it also softens that hard edge. And then we're going to go and paint some more softness into that edge, I do believe, before we're through, so that our hardest contrast lines are lines that we want people to actually look at, not tree lines in and of themselves. Martin, I can't answer that for Nicholas. There was a sky rendered in. It did look like it was an HDRI. I would agree. I would say that Nicholas probably could have gotten a little bit closer to the end result he was looking for in 3D, which would make post easier. If you guys remember the original rendering, it was still a very bright sky. And I try to kind of get the tonality, even if I am going to replace the sky because of sky shapes or cloud shapes for compositional reasons, I do tend to try to get like all of the tonality and general feeling right in 3D typically. And there's something else I was going to say there, and then I completely lost my train of thoughts. Skies, rendering, cinematic look. What was it? HDRIs. Oh, I lost it. It'll maybe come back to me. Again, just kind of like tweaking these colors to keep everything in balance. I wanted it to be quite subtle by the end of it. And right now everything's just kept getting darker and darker and darker. So we're going to go and lighten things up. We're going to lighten things up specifically away from the camera. And since I don't have a usable depth mask to use, I'm just kind of painting it loosely. And to be honest, on an image this size and this resolution, and because they're relatively subtle, like adjustments mostly to black levels, they're not super duper, they don't need to be super duper clean, effectively. What else was I going to say? I'm not sure what else I was going to say. I use a lot of blend diff on this. I used a little bit of blend diff with Martin's, which is just if you double clip on the layer, you can adjust whether it's affecting the blacks or the whites or any gradient in between there, which is helpful. I find really helpful when you're editing over top of a completed image, so that you can kind of isolate things without necessarily selecting them. It's effectively like procedural luminosity masking, if you guys are familiar with that. Super powerful and super quick for this sort of stuff. And I think we're getting close to finished on this guy. Here you can see I wanted to paint another layer of depth into this thing. And by obviously this is a complete over adjustment. You guys see me do this a lot, which is make things really bright or like really saturated or whatever else to be able to see the adjustments that I'm making or the map that I'm painting in a little bit more clearly before toning it back. I do that all the time. And then I just kind of, same idea here. We completely lost all of some of these wires, which in a perfect world, I would have been able to grab a mask and just kind of darken them down to make sure that they stay in front of things. But for like at least a quick read from a distance, at least they're still visible there. And I think that's it there. Yeah, now we're saving, so yes. So those are my thoughts on Nicholas's image, and I really liked it. I really liked working on it. I'm always kind of torn on these images that are like really polished to come with what I should do for them. But I hope that there was something valuable in that, or something insightful, or something that you guys can think about when you're editing your own images. Again, pretty subtle changes altogether, all things considered. This was his initial image, and then this was mine. And so basically just breaking up all of these lines so that without making it, I kind of reduce contrast in the image overall, but most specifically locally, I reduce contrast between these trees in the background and increase contrast with this guy, which might have gotten a little bit overdone. And obviously this building's always going to be a major focal point. It's got a nice hard line on it. It's big. It's intimidating. Everything's kind of leading you towards it. So Nicholas, awesome work. Thank you for sending me an image. I really enjoyed it. And I hope you got something from it. Now we're on to number 2 of the day. Good old Martin Banners. Martin was kind enough to send me him pronouncing his name, and I'm pretty sure I heard sounds that I've never heard before in those simple letters. Either way, Martin, I love this image. You referenced a Pixar film, Onward, as like the motivation for the image, which I don't have handy anymore, I don't think. Not important. So this is another one that, like, it's very polished. It's got a cool look to it. I really, really like it. But I'm always a little bit lost on, like, do I just paint over this? Because I think there's some compositional things that I personally would change. Or do I try to edit it? And I kind of did both, and then it got blurry. I'm not sure. I'm not going to show... I think we'll watch the time-lapse of this and then talk about the changes or talk about them as they happen. Because these are, like... The further along an image gets, and this is true even if I'm working on my own stuff, the further along an image gets, the harder it is for me to kind of look at it from that 10,000 foot perspective. And the things that I would personally change in this image are kind of like those fundamental placing of things. And so we're going to see it, but I want to highlight a couple of things that, like, do jump out at me on this guy. And you're going to see me fix these things, or fix is a strong word, address these things to some degree in the edit. But you can see that, like, we have, ooh, that guy's a big line. You have this tree that's, like, really competing with your house. And for me, the house is more of the subject than the van, is my kind of read on this, and that could be right or wrong. We have the tree that's super close to the house, which I think you need to give your subject, I think, a little bit more room to breathe, or at least that's my general rule on things. And then these guys here almost exactly match the value of the house, right? And so I think, and it breaks up the silhouette of the house, which is really all that's defining the house. So that was one issue. One issue I don't really tackle because I wasn't entirely sure how, is that this edge here, which you can't really see because I'm painting with the wrong color, is a really, really hard edge that I think, like some trees back here, something to soften this edge up a little bit would have helped remove a little bit of the emphasis on it. Last thing is light balance. So we have these have all been set back to normal. I do not know how you guys work this way. I haven't worked this way in years and years and years of, like, having, like, a lighting pass for this one, and then we have, like, the volume pass, and then we have the beauty pass, and then a post-processing pass. Definitely not my style of working, which was a challenge for me. But if we let's look at the final. If we look at the lighting, we have two major light sources, right? We have this sunlight or moonlight coming in from, screen left, and then we have whatever's causing the glow behind the house, which is, some type of eerie, ominous look to it. But they're pretty well balanced. Like, we can see how dim the headlights are relative to the other lights, which suggests that the other lights are quite bright. If you have headlights and a moon, the moon doesn't even compete with how bright headlights are. And here we have headlights as not very bright relative to both the backlight of the house and the side light from the left. And so my kind of general rule, whenever I'm thinking about lighting, especially with multiple sources, is having like a very clear hierarchy in my head. So that for an image like this, okay, the thing that I want to read and the thing that I want to be dominating the overall lighting in the scene is the light from the back. So I would dial that in without looking at any other lights, and then make sure that every other light that I add to the scene is less prominent. So like you could actually turn the headlights up because they're so like localized and directional, and then turn way down this almost daylight level light coming in from, you know, a sun or a spotlight or whatever it might be. I think having like a very clear kind of lighting idea and a very kind of easily interpretable lighting idea makes images like these read very clearly. I think that you get, when I look at this image, I get a little bit of like the tilt shift miniaturization effect. And I think it's from a combination of a decent amount of depth of field for an image that's looking at such a wide expanse. Right, like the front's quite blurry, probably a little bit more blurry than almost any lens would actually give you in this scenario. And then there's the lighting almost feels like it's spotlights right outside of the little maquette that someone like kind of rigged up. And there's nothing wrong if that was the intention, which I would love to hear. If you were going for like a tilt shift miniaturization look, then I think you probably could have played that up with more depth of field. But otherwise, I think from a lighting perspective, getting things to balance a little bit more would go a long way. So we're gonna look at like 2 50% done paintovers basically, as I'm trying to figure out kind of my thoughts on this image. That was not the intention. Okay, well, so the first option suggests what I would do, I think, to try and combat that. Let's get it queued up here. Because I think there's some scale issues, and maybe it could just be me. But when I look at this, I see like a little Scooby-Doo thing, which is actually, I think, pretty cool. But it doesn't, like the lens length suggested by the relative size of the van and the car feels like a little, or the van looks, and the house looks a little bit off to me. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one, Martin. It's a tricky one. It's the DOF, like, even if you use like actual F numbers, depending on the renderer you're using, you really got to kind of track things in by eye for like how they feel for you. Because obviously depth of field is affected by both aperture size, but also lens length and focal distance, I'm sure you know as a photographer. But for something like this image, you might have used, something, what should have been like a 35 millimeter lens with the camera turned sideways. If your renderer doesn't support that and it's just a vertical portrait, but it's still reading the actual angle of view from left to right, then it needs to get much bigger. And then there's all these things that start to complexify, make more complex depth of field in CG. Yeah, I don't think that necessarily that the scale of them is actually off. It's more like how they visually read together, if that makes sense. And maybe it's how, like, we have the van kind of coming in on terrain that's down instead of up, which isn't unnatural, but just looks a little bit different than if it was actually headed towards it. I'm not entirely sure. I can't say I figured it out. But let's watch the time lapse of what we got going, and I kind of forget which one's first. It's gonna flicker a little bit as I look at and then figure out the kind of compositing method that was done. And there's a question for doing passes. For things like light balance and fog and all of that, I try to get that as close as I can in camera, so to speak, inside of the render frame, so that like all of the light sources are balanced and acting properly relative to one another. And then generally speaking, I might keep like a direct lighting pass or a subsurface pass depending on how I'm going to paint on things. But generally speaking, then I just use actual selections and very, very heavily rely on the depth pass. I don't typically play too much with direct lighting passes anymore. There was a time back in the day where you could render out all of like the V-Ray raw elements individually and then composite them in a very specific way, and then you got the result of that with all of the different blend modes gave you the beauty pass. But it doesn't give you it gives you a lot of work, and then you still have to play within it. I don't know. It never really suited me as a method of working, which isn't to say that it's wrong or that it's a bad way of working, just not my particular way of working. And so this one I did not paint over the finished image. I don't think. No, I started with the, I think just the beauty pass and started adding things kind of little by little. And then in a second here, you're going to see me start to kind of cut up and rearrange some things. I believe. This was a very scattered editing process because it's like, what do I do? I like the image as it is. I'm not sure how much to change. Changing little things didn't seem like a significant suggestion because with the exception of, I think, the final edit being a little bit too bright for my liking, overall bright, I love the way it came out. Yeah, so we're going to start kind of adjusting things. The other thing is that we have our two main subjects, the house and the car. They're both kind of in the center of the frame, kind of like equidistant from the center of the frame. And they are, they're both like the van has the big rock right behind it, and the house has the tree right next to it. So like neither one has like a lot of white space around it. And they're both kind of, it's an asymmetrical composition, but everything's kind of like equally asymmetrical, if that makes sense to you. What's going on? I don't know what's going on. Here we go. So I don't know that I like this more as a composition. You can see I don't fully keep it. And I don't think I have a final answer of, Martin, if I was doing this is exactly what I would do with this image. Some of the little things definitely, such as like giving the house a little bit more room to breathe, and then we're going to clean up the silhouette here in a second. After some fun selecting stuff, so that it has just a little bit more space around it to breathe, and the silhouette becomes a little bit more clear. And it's, like everything I do on these paintovers, it's a little heavy-handed. And then the other thing, I think, if you did move the van down with this, now the perspective on the van's weird, but just try and ignore that. You'd be able to obviously see a little bit of the roof here if you actually moved it in 3D as opposed to just quickly doing it in post. But you create all of this extra visual depth, kind of the same thing as in Nicholas' image, is that now, as opposed to relative to the image, the house and the van initially are kind of like the same. Like one's the front middle ground and the next is the back middle ground. And now we moved the van much further, which gives quite a bit more visual depth from front to back inside of the image. And you can see I've way toned down the sunlight effect. Now I want to see. So that was kind of one idea, and we'll look at it again here in a second. The second idea that I try here with limited success is kind of recomping things based off of the layers. And this was kind of an experiment for me. Like, what would I do if I actually was trying to work with these layers? The idea that I had in mind, and we'll see how success... Actually, can't even think of what it ends up looking like. Yeah, it looks okay. The idea that you're kind of seeing here is that I'm trying to take the elements that will allow me to kind of isolate. I want the fog and that whatever that light is from the background to be the main light source. So we're starting from there and just building things up slowly. So like introducing a little bit of that sunlight, but not so much that we actually get highlights anywhere. Or we still get a little bit on the rocks here. That could have been toned down a bit. I'm just grabbing the painting layers from the headlights and the taillights from before to give them a little bit more of their own kind of local color. And it's going to... I'm not sure how much more I do on this. Oh yeah, I go and I clean up some of the trees. Just a smidge. But yeah, I'm doing a lot of the same things, but trying to make it work just with without moving stuff. So here's kind of starting to... You can see me, like, I'm just toying with these things of like, okay, if I start painting things, you need to paint the whole image, kind of. I always get a little bit lost, but you can see how harsh that edge is on the right, especially right now, which draws a lot of attention to itself, and I think you could maybe lighten it, but you would have to move it to make that plausibly. I'm not sure what the answer is on that. Borat, welcome, my friend. Thank you for being here, and I'm glad you're enjoying it. What other comments am I not catching up on? Martin, I know. How many times have we had this conversation of you gotta kill your heroes sometimes? The devil's definitely in the details, and they can be so satisfying, especially in these like beautiful environments like such as this, that we can render all of these beautiful like mosses and rocks and everything. But then you need to look at the image as a whole and say, is this image about the rocks and the detail, or is that just ancillary supporting information? And it's hard to do. Like in my own work, I definitely find like that. Yeah, but I spent all this time on this thing, and I really, really dig it. But from a viewer's perspective, I'm always thinking to myself, okay, what have I done that is that tells the story that I'm trying to tell to the viewer? Is it adding interest, or is it just distracting a viewer? Okay, so let's see if there's anything else to say that I didn't say whilst reorganizing the screens and all of that fun stuff. It's so hard, Martin. It's so hard. Okay, so let's see here. So this was the original image. And yeah, like if you look at the reference image that even you were looking at, like this is much, much brighter. And I feel like that is one of the things that's giving me a little bit of the miniaturized look, that like the light's just too bright. And so this was the second edit that we looked at. And yeah, we kill a ton of your heroes in that one. And it's not perfect, and I think that we lost, like, this turned to like just like a straight silhouette. Yeah, it's just a straight silhouette most seniors. We have a little bit of surface detail on it. It would probably be nice to have like a little bit of whatever's causing this light in the back, catching a few little bits and edges, just to highlight things, so that it wasn't just a straight silhouette. But I'm definitely, not gonna go out and say that this guy is better than this, because I love your edit. Maybe somewhere in between the two is that perfect mix of keeping things beautiful and but also focused. But like some of the little things, cleaning up the silhouette so that it's not broken by these kind of trees, like right next to it. And like here, we definitely read more of a relationship. This was the other quick edit, and that completely kind of changes the read of the scene, I think. Better? I'm not sure that I'm willing to go out and say better or not. But another thing to just, I guess, think about as an idea. Because I think even if I wanted to keep this roughly the same size, I think I would have either moved the camera or adjusted the terrain just so that... let's see, let's get a nice bright old... pink will do. You know, like we can see, like, within the image, right, we kind of have both sitting on these, like, you know, pretty tight lines. Like, that's not rule of thirds, but that's tighter than rule of thirds. But I would say, like, taking this, let's see here, moving this guy like up a little bit, and then moving this guy down a bit, and then some rough painting. Let's just kind of do some scribbles. Scribble, scribbles, scribble, scribbles. Get rid of the hard edges. Make that look, oops. Even that, if we look at it from a distance and try to ignore the sloppiness of it, right, like there's still a decent amount more visual separation. Maybe we didn't go far enough on that change. I kind of like this idea. So this, I moved him down but didn't scale him, so he's not closer to the camera. It's just, this is on more of a hill. Obviously, it's super duper sloppy. That I find kind of interesting. Angel, yes, adding in an actual person silhouette, or having, like, you could even go and be super ominous about the whole thing and take this and, you know, put a dude up here. He's a little big. I'm not sure what that pose is. But that does change the story. So that would be that would change kind of the narrative that you're telling in the image. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad suggestion, but it's a very subjective one. But something that, like, and also, like, by moving this further and further towards the edge, you're driving home the idea that the important thing is the house, right? In the same way that you know, taking the house part of things and moving that somewhere up here. Come on. There we go. Scribble, 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 scribble. It's very satisfying to scribble. Taking that and moving him all the way up to the top edge there, at least to me, from a compositional idea, is going to drive more and more attention down to our van here. And then we'd want to kind of highlight, obviously, the lights on that. But I don't think that would be as cool as something like that. Or just leaving it how it is, because it's awesome how it is as well. So yeah, so those are my thoughts for you, Martin. I hope that there was something you know, a poquito of insight for you in those. I think I like that edit the best for me, if I had to pick it. And yeah, that is all I've got today, folks. Martin, I have all of these kind of quick things saved. I can send them to you if you would like. I'd be more than happy to. Guys, thank you as always for being here. Martin, thank you for submitting an image as well to Nicholas. Whenever you watch this, thank you for submitting an image as well. I do appreciate it. I love doing these. I find them to be challenging and rewarding and fun. And if you guys get something from it as well, everybody's winning on that, which makes me happy. So if you guys have an image that you would like me to paint over, whether it's, you know, a very, very rough sketch image, test render, final image, anything, send it to mike@droki.com or just hit me up on any DM, wherever you can find me, and we'll figure it out from there. I really, really enjoy doing them. So, guys, have a wonderful weekend. We will be back on Monday. I hope you guys had a good week. It was weird not doing streams during the week. These are the first weekdays I didn't do a stream on these past couple of days, so that was a little strange. But we're back on Monday, and I'm looking forward to it. So until that time, I hope everyone stays positive, has a great weekend, takes care of themselves and those around them, and is kind to one another. We are going to be having the Fabio's rendering competition. I was supposed to say this at the beginning. There's a link below to the announcement for Fabio's rendering competition. I'm going to be one of the judges. It's Together We Stand is the topic. It's going to be me and Fabio, and hopefully Mr. Clark is also going to be joining us, which we're super duper excited about. It's really hard to tell like an actual story or convey an actual message and not just a mood in an image, especially one that is as loaded as something that comments on the political landscape and race problems that we have here in America. There are some people that have been doing some amazing work for it. I'm really excited to talk about it. It's going to be a good judging. That's going to be on Monday at some point. You have to pay attention to Fabio, and obviously I'll post when we have a specific time. But if you're thinking about creating something, I would very much encourage you to do so. I am excited to look at them, and we're excited to talk about them. So that's what I got. Check the Fabio video if you're thinking about making an image. The theme is Together We Stand. I can't wait to look at everything. I've already seen some cool stuff coming out from it. But until then, until Monday, guys, be well. We'll talk to you all soon. Oleg, good to see you. Late is always fine by me. And Clark, I'm glad you're excited. I'm glad you're joining us for it. Guys, that's enough babbling from me. Thank you. We will see you on Monday. Awkward time, always a little bit more awkward when I got to get the walk home together. We will see you guys soon. Peace.